Chapter 6. Avery, in her perfect living room, decorated with a vintage sofa reupholstered in handmade fabric from a third-generation block printer in Jaipur, a coffee table consisting of a marble plinth shipped from Denmark, and 840 pounds a roll gold-embossed wallpaper from Soane Britain, interior designers to the royals. Avery was preparing to excoriate her less-than-perfect youngest sister. "It was a party, Avery," said Lucky, going on the defensive before Avery could even begin the blistering opening statement she'd practiced in the shower that morning. "Remember those? I drank too much, like everyone did, and had a bit of trouble getting my key in the lock. Please don't make a big deal out of this. I found you half naked and unconscious outside my front door, and you're asking me not to make a big deal of it? Why are you not making more of this? Do you have so little concern for yourself? A catastrophizer? Where do you even get this stuff? I'm a realist. I live in reality. Maybe you should try it. Negativity isn't some higher version of reality. It's just being judgmental. By your standards, every person in Britain would have a drinking problem." Hello, they do. Have you seen the men in this country? They all look 50. Now it was Lucky's turn to snort. "As someone who is actually interested in men, I can promise you they do not." Avery flicked her head in exasperation. "You know I had boyfriends before Cheety. Remember Steve?" Lucky barked a dry laugh. "That guy who used to bring the Tupperware containers of deviled eggs over to the apartment? Steve does not count." Avery turned away in frustration. Steve had undeniably been a dud. She should not have brought up Steve. "Who's being judgmental now?" she rebounded. "Anyway, all that is beside the point. You want to normalize this shit? Fine. But I am not going to sit here and tell you it's okay. You are not okay. I think I should be the judge of whether or not I'm okay. And I am. I'm great. I'm fucking thriving." Avery turned to Cheety, who had appeared in the doorway, clutching her hands in front of her chest. "I can't talk to this person," Avery said, gesturing toward Lucky. "It's pointless." "Sweetheart," said Chitty to Avery, "sit down. Let's make some tea and discuss this like people who love each other." Lucky and Avery looked at each other and almost smiled. It was just like their mother. Familial strife, emotional turmoil, cancer, the climate crisis. There was seemingly nothing she did not believe could be remedied, or at least relieved by a cup of tea. But Lucky looked away and the moment passed. Avery's rage rushed back in. "She's fucking killing herself, Cheety." Avery turned back to Lucky. "Did Nikki not teach you anything? Do you still not get the part about the fucking fragility of life?" "She doesn't mean that," said Cheety to Lucky. "Oh, fuck you," spat Lucky back at Avery. "You act like you're so much better than us. You're not. You're not better than anybody. You've always been an uptight asshole. Now you're just a rich one." "She didn't mean that," said Cheety to Avery. "And by the way, you're not my mother," continued Lucky. "I already have one useless one. I don't need another." "She's my useless mother too," said Avery. "And I don't want to be your mother. You're 26 years old, Lucky. It's not cute anymore. Being a total mess isn't something to be proud of." "You're not a mess," said Cheety to Lucky, then to her wife. "That's unfair, Avery." Avery rounded on Cheety. "Why are you defending her?" "I'm not defending anyone. I am trying to get you both to see that attacking each other will not help the situation." Avery gave each of them a long look. Suddenly, and with a surprising and searing clarity, she missed her mother, that woman who had so consistently let her down. At least with her mother, she was allowed to remember that she had once been a child. Around her sisters, she was always the eldest, which meant, in comparison to them, she was never young. But she was tired of being the grown-up. She was tired of being herself. "You know what? I'm sick of this," she said. "I'm sick of having to play the bad guy all the time." "That's because you are," shot Lucky. "Ever since you bought this house, you're like some corporate cyborg with a blowout." Avery turned to Cheety. "I can't call her a mess, which she categorically is, but she can call me a corporate, whatever she called me. How is that fair?" "No one's agreeing with her," Cheety tried to soothe. "I am," chimed Lucky. "I am agreeing with me." "You know what? You're right," said Avery, her voice dripping with scorn. "I'm sorry for making a success of myself. I'm sorry for not being like our parents and forcing my family to live in a fucking shoebox while I drink myself to oblivion. I'm sorry I wanted something better than the upbringing we got." "And you think I don't?" Lucky gasped. Why do you think I do what I do? You think I like getting my measurements taken every year like I'm fucking cattle? Do you know how degrading and dumb 90% of the shit I have to do is? You think I want to wear pink tulle? But I made more money by the time I graduated from high school than most people make, and I don't know. I made a shit ton of money. I have no doubt you did, said Avery. But where is it, Lucky? Do you have savings? Stocks? Where's that money today? Lucky looked away. I'll make more, she murmured. And it will go up your nose too, declared Avery. Enough, said Chiti. I can't listen to you two attack each other anymore. You both work hard. You both have been through a lot. There's no competition. But Chetty didn't understand what it was like to have sisters. Against their parents, against the world at large, they were fiercely allied. But among themselves, everything was a competition. There was never enough attention, never enough money, never enough love to go around, so they fought for every scrap. I don't need this, Avery said. I'm going out. That's right. Leave, Lucky said. Treat me like you treat everyone else when they don't meet your exacting standards. Ignore that, said Chiti to Avery. Where are you going? Don't go. I don't know, said Avery, launching herself toward the door. Back to the office. It's a Sunday, pleaded Chiti. So I need to be anywhere but here. We're not done with this conversation, said Chiti. You might not be, said Avery, but I am. I am so fucking done. This is why you have no friends, Lucky called after her as she left the room. Avery slammed the front door and walked down the road. She waited to check that no one was following her. Then she called him. He answered on the second ring. So we're doing phone calls now? He said. What are you doing? Want to smoke a cigarette? He laughed softly. I would, but I'm home. Where's that? I can drive. You want to come to where I live? I want to see you. A pause. Avery forgot to exhale. I'll text you my address, he said. If Avery had not gone back to AA the previous week, if she had not chosen a sparsely populated meeting that she had never been to before, if he had not happened to be sitting in the back row when she snuck in late, he may never have become the rocks upon which she would dash her marriage and life. But she did, and he was, and the rest was inevitable. She'd been relieved that the meeting was at the same time as her former home group, so it was unlikely anyone she knew would be there. She didn't want to be asked where she'd been for the past year or how she was, if she was maintaining her spiritual condition or living in her character defects. Because Avery, by her own estimations, was living in all of them, stealing, lying, judging, fearing, and resenting everything and everyone. To avoid the pre-meeting small talk or eager questions about whether she was a newcomer, she had waited on the corner until 15 minutes after the meeting started. A hard act for someone like Avery, for whom punctuality was a kind of religion. The speaker, a middle-aged woman with a heavy face of makeup, was already well into her story by the time Avery slipped in. She did a quick scan of the room. No one she recognized. She took a seat in the back next to the table of digestive biscuits and trays of lukewarm tea. The speaker was cataloging a seemingly never-ending list of abusive relationships with men, starting with her father, of course, and ending with an ex-husband who'd embezzled money from her, then left her for a friend's daughter. Now, in her third year of sobriety, in addition to alcohol, she was abstaining from all her triggers: sugar, cigarettes, coffee, shopping, gossip magazines, and sex. Especially sex, she took care to reiterate. The other day, I was dying to go out and pick up a man, she said. But then I had to ask myself, would that bring me closer to or further from a drink? Is that what my higher power really wants for me? So I turned it over and went to a meeting. And guess what? I picked up a sponsee instead. Indulgent chuckles from around the room. Avery involuntarily rolled her eyes. Somewhere during this rotation, they landed on the man next to her. He was writing with earnest concentration in his notebook. Could he seriously be taking notes on this? Then she remembered that she had done that herself when she was younger. She used to love meetings, love the stories, the depth of identification that could bubble up from nowhere like a hot spring in a desert. She could be listening to someone ostensibly nothing like her, who would describe with almost uncanny precision her exact feelings and thoughts. That was the magic of the fellowship when it worked. The realization that the parts of yourself that were the most hidden, most shameful, were what connected you most deeply to others. In AA, you were never an outsider, never alone. For years it had felt like she always had a golden lattice of sober people beneath and around her, ready to catch her if she fell. But she had been falling for a year now, and no one had caught her yet. The truth is, she knew she was the problem. Relating to others was a muscle. A little over a year ago, she would have loved this share too. What was it she'd been told the ism and alcoholism stood for? I separate myself. That was her, all right. Separating herself, then wondering why she felt apart. Avery let her eyes scan her neighbor's page. He appeared to be writing poetry. She smiled to herself. A sober poet. Just what the world needed. As she was thinking this, he glanced up. He could have been embarrassed, as she would have been, and closed the page, but he only smiled in collusion. They looked at each other. He was young, black, and striking, though not exactly handsome. He had an unusual face, a straight, serious mouth, and wide eyes the shape of two drawn bows. Avery was struck. After the meeting, she found him outside smoking. He was alone, standing just a little away from the group that was discussing which Le Pain Quotidien to go to for fellowship. She sidled up alongside him. "Could I bum one of those?" she asked. Thank God for smoking, she thought, the universal conversation starter for shy, socially awkward, or self-destructive strangers the world over. He pulled one from his pack and leaned over to light hers with an old silver Zippo. "I'm Charlie," he said, as the flame shot up between them. "Avery," she said, inhaling. "So, you're a poet?" He had an irrepressible smile, as though in a constant and amusing dialogue with himself. "Guilty," he said, "and you're an American." She smiled. "Guilty, too," she said. A moment of silence drifted down between them like a balloon losing helium. "I didn't know real poets still existed," she said. "I don't know how real I am," he said. "But I exist. Are you a real American?" "I'm from New York," she said. "So no," he said, and she laughed. "And you can make a living? As a poet?" A flicker of self-consciousness shot through her. She sounded like she was giving a job interview. When had she become this conservative? She had written poetry herself when living on the commune. Charlie's face, however, remained open and sanguine. "Some can, but I make my living as a lowly copywriter." "That doesn't sound so lowly to me," said Avery. The Le Pain Quotidien group, including the speaker who was swearing off men, was shuffling toward them, ostensibly to invite them to join. Charlie and Avery shared a look that communicated a mutual desire to avoid this. It was bad, she knew, to pair off and separate from the group, an old form of bonding that didn't serve her sobriety, but then Charlie touched her elbow, and all she could think about was the quickest way out of there. "Hey," he said, giving her a knowing look. "You walking to the tube?" "Fuck it," she thought. "Let's go," she said. Before the others reached them, they took off together in step, both taking regular drags of their cigarettes, a heady sensation of escape quickening their pace. It was a beautiful summer evening, and the light as they set off up the hill was the rich yellow of good French butter. London was so lovely when it chose to be, Avery thought. Charlie turned to her and smiled. "What about you?" he asked. "What about me?" "What do you do?" "Don't you know that's a rude question?" That smile again. His teeth were surprisingly small and cream like tiny pearls. "Forgive me," he said. Avery looked at his funny face, so close to handsome yet slightly off the mark, and felt she could forgive him anything. "I'm a lawyer," she said. "Ah," he nodded. "The least lowly of trades." Now Avery smiled. It was true. "So what are you doing here?" he asked, nodding back toward the meeting. "Too much champagne and cocaine for you. Had to call it quits?" This was so far from the truth of the last years of her using as an itinerant drug addict, Avery had to laugh. "What makes you think those were my drugs of choice?" she asked. "You just seem like kind of a fancy lady." "Why?" "I don't know. Your shoes, maybe." Avery looked down at her Gucci loafers with the horse bit buckle. She had been wearing them last weekend when she stole a quilted wallet from Chanel. No one ever suspects the woman in loafers. She blushed. "Nah, don't get me wrong. They look good," he added. "I'm just surprised to meet someone like you at a meeting is all." How much time do you have? She asked. I just picked up my 90 days. He was barely able to conceal his pride. So he was a newcomer, she thought. Probably still on a pink cloud, that euphoric period of early recovery when you're through the physical withdrawals, but reality hasn't quite set in yet. A brief window of time when anything seemed possible. How she missed it. You'll see, there's all sorts here, she said. In New York, we say this disease gets everyone from Park Avenue to the park bench. He grinned. I like that. What would the London equivalent be? I don't know. From Mayfair to my bedroom, he said. The blush would not leave her cheeks. That works, she said. How come I've not seen you here before? I stopped coming for a little, she said. Why'd you stop? Honestly? Sure. I stopped being able to listen to people talk about God. Charlie raised his eyebrows. Go on, he said. I couldn't handle hearing about how someone's higher power never gives them anything they can't handle. If that was the case, we wouldn't have rape or child abuse or incest or domestic violence, and people wouldn't develop PTSD or complex trauma or crippling drug dependencies, all of which are the direct results of being given exactly what you can't handle. Charlie was listening to her closely. With respect or reservation, Avery couldn't tell. So you don't believe everything happens for a reason and all that? He asked. She took a deep breath. She could give some pat, newcomer-appropriate answer, but she was indeed a lawyer, and the compulsion to be right, to hammer home her case, was as deeply entrenched in her as breathing. I believe that everything happens, she said. Period. Or full stop, as you would say. That's it. Things happen, and we have to learn to live with them, as long as suicide is off the table, that is. If we can find meaning in them, fine, but even if we can't, we still have to live with them. The meaning is an afterthought, an anesthesia. Happens is the only word in that statement that's empirical. The rest is whatever helps you sleep at night. Charlie looked at her as if he were evaluating the cover of a book he'd picked up, but wasn't sure he wanted to read. I guess I can't argue with that, he said. They walked together in silence through the quiet residential streets. From over an ivy-covered brick wall, 2 children on a trampoline in their garden careened in and out of view, their blonde hair lifting and falling around their faces as they shrieked with joy. Also, my sister died, Avery said. When Charlie looked at her again, his assessment seemed to shift and soften. There was a tenderness in his face that was entirely unforced. I'm sorry to hear that, he said. Recently? Avery nodded. Last year. Do you mind if I ask you how? No, it's fine. Avery cleared her throat. She overdosed. Oh, man. Charlie shook his head softly. Your sister was an addict, too. Avery shook her head. She had never thought of Nikki like that when she was alive, and it felt like a betrayal to do so now. No, she said firmly. She had chronic pain. It's this condition called endometriosis. Men don't get it. She tried to keep the bitterness out of her voice as she continued. She went to lots of doctors. She had surgeries, but they couldn't seem to help her. In fact, they were fucking useless. She remembered sitting with Nikki in the emergency room when the pain had become too much to sleep. Her sister curled in on herself as though she could make herself small enough for the hurt not to find her. The nurses in the hospital treated her like a criminal. They thought she was there for the drugs. All she was asking for was comfort. A little relief. In that sense, perhaps she was no different from an addict. Weren't all addicts looking for relief from some invisible pain? Weren't all people? Avery tried to modulate her voice so she sounded reasonable, like someone simply conveying a tragic series of events and not a woman half mad with rage and grief. Understandably, given the pain she was in, she began judiciously. She took painkillers. That's what they're there for. They kill pain. But she developed a dependency and ended up buying a batch on the street that contained fentanyl and... Avery inhaled sharply. Would it ever be easier to tell this story? Would it ever not make her want to grab the world like a sheet of drawing paper on which a terrible mistake had been made and rip it up, rip it down, and start again? But there had been a slither of relief, too, which Avery never admitted to anyone. Nikki had been suffering for years by the time she died. The problem with her pain was that it was invisible. Avery wished she could have given it crutches, some object that made it obvious to everyone around her, but she had learned now that most pain is private. Language grasped at, but never caught, it. Each time Nikki tried to find the right words, it seemed to change shape. Sometimes she said it was a dull, low ache, foreboding and inevitable, like the darkening of the sky before a storm. Sometimes it was hot electric bursts that shot and pinged through her, leaving her doubled over and gasping for air. Sometimes she said it felt like crashing waves gathering momentum and receding, her insides the beaten and unyielding shore. And when it was gone, she waited for it, like a volatile husband who has left in a rage but will inevitably return. Sometimes, she said, the waiting felt like the worst part of all. Where language failed, numbers were no better. How many times had Nikki been asked to rate her pain on a scale of 1 to 10? It was a riddle. Choose too low and she might not get the relief she needed. Choose too high and she'd be dismissed as hysterical. What was the magic number? She tried 6, 7, 8, 9. She never dared consider herself a 10. Avery had watched her writhe in hospital waiting rooms and doctors' offices trying to find the right combination of words and numbers that would unlock permanent relief. She never found it, but Avery left for London anyway. She could still remember the howl of grief escaping through the phone when Nikki called to tell her what the doctors had said. It was late on a Friday night in London, and Avery was at a bar in Soho, where she'd been meeting some of Chitty's other therapist friends. She had wanted to make a good impression, was unwilling to answer the call. But she did, she reminded herself now. She did answer. The rain had stopped just in time for the weekend, and the streets were still slick when she stepped outside. Hysterectomy. She'd pressed a hand to her ear to drown out the noise of passing revelers, everyone drunk and high-spirited after the rain. Could you repeat that? The neon lights of the bar splashed and smeared along the wet pavement. Hysterectomy. That was the word she hadn't been able to hear. The removal of the uterus. The key to permanent relief. The last time Avery saw Nikki, she knew her sister was different, though it was impossible to say exactly why. Afterward, it was her eyes she remembered. Her pupils were too small, 2 tiny dots that would not hold Avery's gaze. Nikki had a face like water, always moving, rippling, dancing. Their mother used to say she should have been an actress. She could convey any emotion, amusement, irritation, incredulity, with the slightest widening of her eyes or jump of her eyebrow. But the last time Avery saw her, she was strangely still, as if holding herself braced against something. They were walking in Regent's Park. Nikki had come to stay for spring break, and it was her final day before returning to New York. She had been herself for most of the trip, but during the last 2 days, she became withdrawn. Avery realized afterward that she had likely been running out of pills, lengthening the space between each dose to make her supply last until she got home. It was an unseasonably warm spring day, so Avery bought them both cornettos from the cafe by the pond. As they walked, Nikki struggled to unwrap the paper from the cone, her hands seemingly uncooperative. "Are you okay, Nix?" Avery asked, glancing at her trembling fingers. She took Nikki's ice cream and smoothly unpeeled the wrapper, then passed it back. "You sure you feel up for flying?" "Why do people keep asking if I'm okay?" snapped Nikki. Avery glanced at her in surprise. She didn't know that anyone else was asking. "My periods do," relented Nikki after a pause. "Oh, I'm sorry." Avery motioned toward a bench they could go sit on. "Is it painful?" She never knew quite how to talk about Nikki's condition, aware as she was of the unfair fact that her own periods had always been remarkably uneventful. "Yeah, well, obviously," said Nikki sharply, then seemed to try to mollify her peevishness. "And it's a busy semester, so I have a lot of grading to do on the plane, but it's not a big deal. I'm good, I promise." "I get it," said Avery, wary of pushing her further. "They're lucky to have a teacher who cares as much as you do. Remember the nuns?" Nikki gave a dry laugh. All 4 of them had gone to a Catholic middle and high school run by a group of nuns who were either oblivious or actively ill-suited to meeting the needs of children. They sat down now on a wooden bench under a shady ash tree and watched the ducks waddle around the pond imperiously. Twin toddlers, each dressed in bright overalls and mini Converse high tops, ran toward a mallard, shrieking with delighted terror as it opened its wings and quacked irately at them. "Look at that," said Nikki, suddenly smiling. "So cute," said Avery dutifully, though, in truth, she thought they should leave that poor duck alone. "You know I got bitten by a duck when we were little?" Nikki said. "You did? When?" in Central Park by the turtle pond. I was probably like 4, but I hid it from Mom so she wouldn't know. Why'd you do that? I thought I'd get in trouble. She was always so exasperated when we needed anything. I think I knew, even then, it was better to deal with it myself. Avery nodded. She could imagine the scene exactly. Lucky would have been only 2. Nikki 4, Bonnie 7, and Avery 9. A day out at the park with them would have been treated as equivalent to navigating a military assault course by their mother. Amazing, thought Avery, that at only 4, Nikki had already understood the reality of their family, but of course they all had. Well, if you ever get bitten again, said Avery, taking her sister's hand, I hope you will tell me. Nikki smiled sadly.